I've now been in the Philippines for over 6 weeks in search of love. Now, it's not a long time, but it's enough time to be able to talk about the beautiful people and the environment and also the downsides. Let's talk. I've now been in Cebu, which is one of the big cities in the Philippines, for over 6 weeks now, and I've shared my time with a nice, sincere Filipina that I met online way before ever getting on a plane. I want to start off by talking about some obvious disadvantages that I've noticed while visiting this country. If you were to drive around a few of the provinces here, your first thoughts are going to be, why doesn't the government make some obvious adjustments and repairs so it's just more manageable and safer to live in? The roads here are horrendous, and I'm not kidding when I say the street structure here is the worst I've ever seen. It's like things just don't make sense when you're driving. It's kind of like a free-for-all. You'll find traffic lights inside the city, but there are many areas where instead of adding a traffic light in the intersection, they have a guy out there that's standing in the middle and having each direction take turns, which even that kind of seems unorganized and definitely not safe. Sidewalks are found in the city, but once you're outside the city, those become fewer and many obstructions, and sometimes they're non-existent, and not to mention extremely unsafe. This place is not a good destination if you are wheelchair bound. I just can't see how they could navigate. Some businesses are being built or expanded right on top of the sidewalks, and the structures are kind of makeshift. It's like they went to Home Depot and got some pieces and parts and came back and just kind of built it real quick. It's crazy because now pedestrians walking by now have to walk into the streets where cars and motorcycles are passing by, and for me, it was way too close. And I sometimes see kids walking through traffic, and I've seen children even playing literally right next to live traffic. As you can see here, I was very cautious and moving slow and came to a complete stop to avoid this young child. You won't find many street names, and in the city there are traffic lights, but more definitely is needed. When you do come across a light, some of them count down for 150, which seems like forever when you're sitting there waiting. It's kind of funny to see people putting their cars in parks and motorbikes actually turning off their engines until the countdown gets closer to 0. There are traffic regulators, but when I went out to shoot around lunchtime, I wasn't able to find any. So possibly they start in the morning for rush hour and then in the evening time when everyone's trying to get home from work. You'll find them in areas of importance, and this could mean intersections or left-hand turns. By the way, those left-hand turns, they're like death turns because you have to literally force your way into traffic to make the oncoming traffic stop. It's kind of crazy. It's something that if you're not from here, you really have to adapt to and understand it and kind of get used to it. It's not easy. Now, these traffic regulators are a little bit corrupt. I've been pulled over 4 times now, and 3 out of 4 times they had asked me for money and they let me go. I was pulled over for minor infractions such as driving through a yellow, or which is legal to do in the United States, or making there was a no left turn. I made a left turn. They pulled me over for that. There was no obvious sign saying not to. Regardless, when they see I'm a foreigner and when they're talking to me and looking over my license and my car paperwork, they always say something like, I think we can work this out, but I'm gonna go to the other side of the car, so lower your window. And the reason for this is so their hands are no longer in the camera's view. I handed them a sum of money, and I think the least I paid was 300 pesos, and the most I paid was 1,000. Now, I'm not saying that this is right, but let's also add that the average wage in the Philippines is 1,493 pesos for 8 hours of work, and that's only $25 USD for the same amount of time. And when you have a family to support, and oftentimes it's more than just your wife and kids, so you can also have your parents and other family members living with you that weren't able to make it on their own. Again, I'm not saying it's right, but oftentimes pressure will make people do the wrong things. Let's talk about the businesses that are along the streets, and this is more so outside the city limits. and I think it would be called the province areas, but there is a lack of building code and proper regulations. I haven't noticed any type of work being done to improve on these issues. Granted, I've only been here for 6 weeks, so I can only go by my observation in that short amount of time. But look at these power lines and data cables. There is a very disturbing part within the government, and that's the amount of corruption that the president has been part of over the past several years. It's estimated he's acquired over $20–30 billion in those few years. If you consider his family and their time in office since, I believe, the 1950s, it's estimated to be around $50 billion. 50 billion. I drive around and I see poverty everywhere and such a broken down system. I don't know how this family could live with themselves. Okay, enough about the bad. Let's talk about the good, because the people here that I've met are the kindest souls, and it's so pleasant to be in their company. I've noticed that this culture puts an emphasis on family values, and it's common to see 2 and 3 generations living in a single house. Something that I've really enjoyed has been the white sand beaches and the clear, calm water. Between the tropical weather and the clear water beaches, no wonder people have made this their travel destination. There are modern amenities, and those can be found in the big cities such as Manila, Cebu, and Davao. But once you leave the city, the bar drops considerably. I've been to several countries while looking for love, and I have never felt so comfortable as I do here in the Philippines. Most people speak English, especially in the big cities, and all the literature and signs and store names that I've seen have all been in English, and this really makes a US foreigner feel right at home. I've also noticed once you get outside the city, you can run into some locals who aren't so strong with English, but I was still able to find a way to communicate. The US dollar versus the peso. I come from the US, and 1 US dollar equals 58 pesos. So my money goes pretty far here in the Philippines, and I'm sure other countries' currency does something very similar. It actually feels good to be generous and kind and splurge a bit. My girlfriend and I have probably been to most rooftop restaurants and bars, and we've also been to several resorts here in Cebu. The cost of living for a foreigner here in the Philippines is very inexpensive, and to be honest, I can certainly see why many foreigners have moved here and made this their home. For me, personally, I'm used to everything being close to me due to living in Los Angeles, so for me, this country hasn't developed enough for me to say I could make this a home, but it's 100% a travel spot, and can be a very good place to find love. Something that I've noticed and I see almost daily when I go to the local mall is the same foreigners and the same people, because it's pretty much the only place to go during the daytime. In the evening time, you have a few more options such as clubs, dance clubs, rooftop restaurants, many bars, and strip clubs if that's your thing, but not much else. I have to mention that there are a few hot spots where the locals gather to meet in the evening time, but I haven't actually been there to experience that, but I'm sure it's a real good time. Now, I don't want to forget to mention how green and tropical the islands are, because this is something that I enjoy and appreciate when I'm around it. The large green leaves, the diverse plants, and the huge canopies all come together with the warm humidity. Now, I'm strange, I know. I love humidity. I love to be sweating. And more so than me sweating is when my woman is sweating and it's running down her face, her neck. Yummy. Okay, thanks for watching. I'm Jason, and I'm looking for love.